High-profile Democrats beginning to admit the party has a communist problem. Let's check it out. And welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. One of the more vile moments you'll see in politics coming from a communist rally hosted by radical influencer Hassan Piker over the weekend. A look at what the far left is really like today. The coalition that is rapidly taking over the Democrat Party, a massive crowd celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, mocking Kirk via song. Take a listen. You ever think you'd see something like that? Just a reminder that we are surrounded by these people. That place was packed as that happened. Communists have killed millions of people throughout history. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? This is how they think. If you don't subscribe to their asinine ideology, they will happily celebrate your death. Piker followed up his performance on stage with this picture, which he captioned, "Carried the flame tonight." Look at the picture. See, he's trying so hard to look like a communist in this. It's all cosplay to him, dressing up as Mao and Stalin. Imagine how much time he spends Googling images trying to perfect the look. How pathetic he really is, as he attaches himself to some of the biggest names in the DSA, Democrat Socialist of America, movement, including the name of Abdul El Sayed, the DSA candidate in Michigan. These guys are good buddies. But it does appear Democrats are waking up, even admitting that there is a cancer taking over their party. Listen to three very prominent Democrats on Bill Maher's show over the weekend. You had Maher, a CNN host you'll recognize, and a big-time New York Times reporter. Listen to how they talk.
They're not running to be members of the Democratic Party. They're running, many of them anyway, as Democratic Socialists. It's a totally different political organization. And in fact, they want to take out the Democratic Party. I mean, that's their stated goal. They not only want to take out the Democratic Party, they want to take out the entire constitutional system.
And they like communism. I proved it here a couple of weeks ago just by quoting them. They use the word a lot. They're not actually trying to hide it, although if you ask them, they will deny it.
If you ask them, they will deny it. They're running to take out the Democrat Party and our constitutional system. That is a quote from a New York Times reporter. And they all just nodded and agreed with that analysis as well. You had Dana Bash from CNN there and Bill Maher. Communists are seeking to destroy the entire country, and they're doing so by commandeering the Democrat Party. And isn't it interesting to hear this so casually mentioned by people who report on Republicans as a consistent threat to the Republic? Yeah, there's some communists who want to dismantle the Constitution and the capitalist system that has created all the wealth and prosperity of the West. They say it much more calmly than they report on Trump's new crypto coin or the ballroom that he's building. He was rude to Zelensky. They get very worked up about that, but they can very casually talk about what exactly is happening to our country and one of our two parties being taken over by something that is such a serious threat. The conversation continued with New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters discussing how recent DSA communist candidates have done an impressive job of better concealing their true agenda from the broader electorate.
Some of them, I mean, this is why El Sayed did quite well in Michigan. This is why the woman who is running against Karen Bass as mayor of L.A. is doing quite well, because they've learned how to sand down the rougher edges, and they don't talk about socialism. They don't talk about seizing the means of production and stuff like that. They're getting, many of them, some of them are not quite ready for prime time, let's be clear, but a lot of them have really done a good job of selling themselves to the public as quite reasonable mainstream politicians.
Selling themselves to the public. They're not talking about seizing the means of production. They almost feel like legitimate mainstream politicians who don't want to bankrupt the country, starve you to death, or throw you in prison if you protest their power. Oh, that's good. He actually uses Abdul El Sayed as an example in that. Hassan Piker's buddy, who always just wants to talk about the cost of living issues in the country and not really give up his real agenda, which God knows. The moderates had better wake up. In Michigan, Mike Rogers right now is reaching out to the middle. You don't need to elect an Egyptian communist just because you hate Donald Trump. That is the message. You will regret it. The same regret New Yorkers feel over Mamdani right now. Or how about in Seattle, which is maybe the worst case of regret we have seen so far. 53% of Seattle Democrats, not Seattle voters, 53% of Seattle Democrats are not just unhappy with their DSA communist mayor, they are demanding a full recall election to get rid of her. 53% of Democrats in a city that blue. Katie Wilson has been a disaster for that city. Terrible marks from voters on drug use, homeless encampments, safety. Is anybody actually surprised? Did they really think this would go well? All these people that have this regret, that are demanding a new election? This was an unemployed 40-year-old woman who was still getting an allowance from her dad. She was a community activist, which means she was a loser. That means unemployed. And you decided to let her run your entire city. Just control all of Seattle. Bragging about driving the hardest working, most prosperous and wealthy people away from her city, as we heard her do.
I think the claims that millionaires are going to leave our state are like super overblown, and if the ones that leave, like, bye.
It's just a 40-year-old chick with not a brain in her head, just been screaming her whole life. Community activist. Now you're the mayor. Now you get to just run the city. Same story with Mamdani, seeing it all over the place. Democrats can't wait to vote for people that have spent absolutely none of their life living in reality. They love this right now. It's very fashionable. Community activists who've never worked, getting wire transfers from their parents while holding up propaganda signs on the side of a road at noon on a Tuesday. Yeah, let's let her run the city. And then they're shocked when the city is a dump. Right now, there's a communist insurgency. Seems like it's all around us, weaponizing the left's hatred of Donald Trump. That's how they're getting in. They know there's this visceral hatred of Trump. And people's reaction is, let's elect the craziest person we can find, the most opposite of him we can find. And that's allowing voters to make horrible primary choices out of anger toward their orange Hitler, threatening our country in a very real way. Marianne Williamson is a Democrat and former presidential candidate. She joins us now. Matt Schlapp is the chairman of CPAC. Good to have you both here. Marianne, I thought that Bill Maher's show was quite interesting on Friday night. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think that there are some radical elements on the left that reasonable people have a problem with, just as there are radical elements on the right that reasonable people have a problem with. But I think the reasonable people among us are those who want to keep our eye on the ball. And that is the fact that the economy in the United States is too difficult for the average American, whether it has to do with food bills, whether it has to do with rent bills, whether it has to do with medical bills, whether it has to do with the problem not even knowing if your food is safe, whether
but what
it
happens
has to do
if,
with the problem.
And I hear you 100%. But if you turn the whole system on its head, if we get rid of the capitalist system and we crash the government, none of these things get any better. And I think that's what people have to understand. It's like the communists telling you they're going to make your life cheaper are going to exacerbate all of these problems tremendously.
Yeah, but be clear. We were talking about Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker is not an elected official. Is not someone running for a Democratic office. So the majority of the DSA-linked candidates are not claiming to be anti-capitalist. They're talking about a regulatory system which has failed the American people because of so much deregulation.
Well, let's get Matt in here.
The moral center back into capitalism.
Understood. I hear your perspective. Matt, go ahead.
I disagree. I really admire these DSA candidates' candor. They've called for the elimination of the Supreme Court, the elimination of the Senate, obviously the elimination of voter ID, the elimination of profit in society. And you look at the kind of the beginning of all this was this idea of ripping down statues of James Madison. Why would you rip down statues of James Madison? Is it really because he was a slave owner? No, it's because he wrote the Constitution that they don't believe in. Same for Thomas Jefferson. They don't believe in the Declaration of Rights. When Marianne talks about these movements that have happened in Republican politics, it's always back to the founders and back to the beauty of why America needs to be cherished.
Right.
These radicals to the left, it's all about ripping America down, ripping down her statues, destroying her institutions.
Yeah, well, Marianne, let me let you jump in on that, because you say that most of these candidates don't want to destroy the country. I think they've said in their past that that's certainly what they want to do.
Right.
Now they're just on their very best behavior.
Okay, so let's talk about the distinction between the candidates and the DSA platform. There are things in the DSA platform that are absolutely as outrageous as you just said.
Yeah.
Abolishing the Constitution is certainly an example. Tearing down a statue of James Madison, I would agree with you. But if you actually look at the candidates are not standing up for policies. And once again, just like you shouldn't always take it back to Biden,
But
we should always take it back to Trump.
But
There's an undermining of the U.S. Constitution, which is as scary as somebody calling to get rid of it. The candidates are not calling to get rid of the U.S. Constitution.
Well, as the New York Times reporter said, are they not, or are they just concealing it now because they're running for office? Matt, I want to show this. Hassan Piker, famously once said, and I know he's not running for office, but this is a guy that has a tremendous amount of influence with these candidates. He's campaigning with most of them. He said America deserved 9/11. He's now trying to walk that back because who knows what his future plans are. His supporters, these are the people that actually follow him. This is the influence that he has. They booed him for trying to take that back and say that this country did not deserve a terrorist attack that killed 3,000 people. Take a listen to this.
America does not deserve 9/11. That's my new thing now. He's been rehabbing his image, which is why.
Matt, that's a room full of people with a visceral hatred for the country that they live in.
Remember the American Taliban and how that made our toes curl? We couldn't imagine an American citizen would go help jihad to try to destroy civilization. It's very hard to draw a distinction between these DSA candidates and the radical idea of jihad. I love the Abraham Accords. I love the idea of working with the, couple of dozen Arab and Muslim countries around the world who are not radicalized. But this jihadi kind of language coming from Piker, he shouldn't be able to stand with any candidate in this country. He shouldn't be able to draw any audiences. People should be repulsed by this vile idea that America should be attacked by terrorists.
I agree with that. Marianne, as far as the broader party, obviously Democrats, you can't win without the energy on the left. But at the same time, you've got that energy is very toxic. What should the party do in this moment?
Hassan Piker is not the Democratic Party.
Right.
Hassan Piker he represents.
But he's the energy on the left.
But no, I would disagree with you on that, actually, Rob. I think he's the energy on a very, very far left, very, truly radical. You guys and I don't disagree about some of what he says, but that is not the Democratic Party. And it is not, when you said, Matt, that he had been actually on the trail with the majority of DSA-linked candidates. No, he has not. Now, and even in the case
How about El Sayed? On election day, he campaigned. Shouldn't El Sayed have to condemn him?
That is one. That is one. That is one. And the people of Michigan are going to have to make a choice for themselves. Yeah. But still, that's not the center of gravity of the Democratic Party. And even in the cases, including El Sayed's, where someone with the DSA link won, he won razor thin. So there's going to have to be a merger of the best ideas from the left, not the radical extreme positions, but the progressive element that want things like universal health care, that want things like greater economic opportunity for people, a way to have the ability to pay their bills, greater opportunity for people to thrive within your capitalist system, by the way. So there's going to have to be a merger and an accommodation because they can't win. They can't win either side without taking the best of the other.
Matt, I got 30 seconds left. What do you think the Democrat Party, how are they going to try and contain this issue?
Well, first of all, we don't know what the Democratic Party is. The Democrat Party is about ready to show us what they are today. I know what they used to be. They were a little less Constitution and a little more spending, and they are flirting with becoming quite radicalized. So we're going to find out what this Democratic Party is, and I'd like to see a little leadership. Name to me the national Democrats who are calling out these people and saying El Sayed isn't worthy of support until he condemns Piker's support. You're seeing this from Democrats, and silence in the face of this terrible immorality will not grow their party and make it less radical.
That's a good point. I got to leave.
I'm not disagreeing on that one.
Just based on time, I got to leave it there. Marianne, thanks for being a good sport. We appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Matt Schlapp, good to see you, my friend. All right, coming up here, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says it is economic D-Day for Iran. As Treasury unleashes the most crippling economic warfare operation in history, Bessent promising the regime's collapse. We're going to talk about this coming up next. And then later in news from the left, evidently Inez Kanter is not going to be allowed to play in the WNBA, which makes you wonder, why is this league so anti-trans?
This was America in 1980, held in contempt by foreign nations. Across the world, people were losing their freedoms. So many countries thought America had seen its day, but we knew better. So we stopped complaining together and started working together. Today, America is strong again. We're looking to the future with confidence and pride. America's best days and democracy's best days lie ahead.
This is our time, you know? His favorite route is the long way around. Now we can take it again. I'm not sure who loves this freedom more, him or me.
Being out here alone is my happy place. Nature can have its threats, but I'm prepared.
I'm not trying to fight wildlife. I just don't want one bad encounter deciding everything.
Carry confidence wherever you go with Byrna. And now it's the biggest sale ever at Byrna.com.
I wanted to have control over drinking instead of alcohol having control over me. I started with Or Health about a year ago. It put the brakes on that I had been looking for. I can drink less and say no, and it's the best feeling in the world.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Hi, I'm Mike Hammond with Signal Relief. If your back bothers you day after day, you know it doesn't just affect your back. It changes how you stand, walk, sleep, and how you feel about yourself. Maybe you smile through the grandkids' game, the grocery store, the yard work, or the family trip, quietly counting the minutes until you must sit down, or maybe you just miss those moments altogether. I know how frustrating it is when your body starts making decisions for you. And that's why I'm proud to introduce Signal Core, our new back support system built specifically for everyday backaches. More technology means more relief, and Signal Core has twice the technology as the original patch. And it comes with our money-back guarantee. It's targeted drug-free back support that you can wear through the day. Try Signal Core today by going to signalrelief.com and order your Signal Core.
Attention homeowners, does your roof look like this? If so, your whole home is at risk for costly damage and repairs. Protect it today with a metal roof from Erie Home. Our roofs are tested to withstand wind up to 120 miles per hour. While hail and heavy snow can destroy traditional shingles, with an Erie metal roof, it's no problem. And they're built to last with a 50-year transferable warranty. And if you call now, get up to 50% off installation. Schedule your free estimate today. Call 1-866-770-ERIE or visit eriehome.com.
Have you ever dreamed of getting your business on TV? At GrowAds.com, we produce a high-end TV spot starting at only $950. Then we air your TV spot on major cable networks in your local area, only at GrowAds.com.
We are launching an economic onslaught against Iran's financial connections around the globe. Today, we are launching Operation Economic Outcast to foreclose every other option available to the Iranian regime. The actions of Treasury and other agencies will tighten the noose and block every potential source of revenue that funds the IRGC and the evil Iranian regime. It is now a time for world leaders to make a decision between prosperity and isolation, peace and terror, America and Iran.
So this is a big deal, right? The Treasury Secretary announcing Operation Economic Isolation, Economic D-Day, aimed at strangulating Iran's economy, forcing an end to this war without having to drop more bombs. Bessent has said that the Iranian regime is going to collapse. That is the stated goal of this. Publishing a Financial Times piece overnight, writing, the world should understand that our objective is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains the tyrannical regime until Tehran stands alone, and then, of course, can't stand at all. Bessent warning that any country, company, or person siding with the Iranian regime will be an economic enemy and targeted the U.S., including a major financial institution that he did not reveal, that he said would be sanctioned and revealed later this week. Take a listen.
that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions, that if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. When the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves. No one should test our resolve. I would expect that you will see a major announcement of a financial institution being sanctioned by the end of this week.
The financial institution sanctions. We're going to find out about that. Senator Marsha Blackburn is on the Senate Finance Committee. She has been working closely with the Treasury Department on this new mission as well. And Treasury asked us to bring you on tonight to talk about this. You're the perfect person to do so. It's good to see you, Senator. Tell us about how powerful this is, because I think for a lot of Americans, we've watched this war kind of drag, and people are saying, how are we going to get out of this thing? This seems like the way out.
Yes, President Trump decided he was going to end what has been a 47-year war with Iran against the American people. And you had the kinetic actions that took place that really disabled so much of their infrastructure, their military. And now Secretary Bessent is spot on by going about this economic outcast and making certain that not only are you sanctioning Iran, there were 60 individuals and entities that were sanctioned today, and they drilled down on 5 sectors that are prime in Iran's decision and process of exporting their oil. You've got their shipping, you've got aviation, you've got gold, you've got digital assets. And this is the type activity that you're going to continue to see. I appreciate that the President and Secretary Bessent have launched it. They're trying to make certain that people that are dealing with Iran, that are paying them, are going to be cut off from accessing the U.S. dollar for any of those transactions.
Is this financial institution that he's hinting at later this week, is that an American financial institution? I can't imagine it is.
I don't know who he was talking in reference to.
So let's talk about this and potentially the impact of this. I mean, because everybody's, Iran seems to just, it's like a cockroach. No matter what you put on it, it kind of survive. They can kind of just buckle down and survive. Is this, Ghalibaf, which is the parliament speaker, told local outlets that the country's hungry, saying that we cannot survive this continuing on. I hope that that's an accurate assessment of what's going on in that country, but Bessent says he wants this regime to fall, right?
And I think that you have to look at this from the economic side as you listen to Secretary Bessent. Their rial is at an all-time low.
2 million for a dollar, by the way. 2 million Iranian rials for a dollar right now. Yeah.
That's right. And they are suffering with unprecedented inflation. We hear that the military and the police are not able to meet their payroll. So this is the type of action that is taking place. Now, I think that they're looking at this as options and how they can proceed. And of course, one thing to do is to tighten that financial noose. I think it is important to note that Secretary Bessent alluded to the fact that there's going to be more to come. As I said, they've identified sectors, they have sanctioned entities and individuals as we go through this process of being certain that Iran is financially isolated, having our neighbor, our allies in the neighborhood joining us, the UAE is supporting
and cutting off the support system that's been propping them up for far too long is a huge part of it. Senator, thanks so much for coming on and giving us the explainer. Thank you. I'm going to bring in KT McFarland, Trump's former deputy national security advisor. Also, Maleki, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, is also a sanctions strategist as well. Good to have you both. So, KT, we got the plan now is in place, and they're implementing it. There's not a real timeline on when they're actually going to strike these requirements of these other countries, but the idea is to isolate Iran. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, we were doing very well. We were doing well enough with this of strangling Iran economically. And what Secretary Besson did today is he's upping the ante. So so Iran was moving money around really through the United Arab Emirates. And this is saying to the United Arab Emirates, look, you guys stop it. You know, you're not going to be able to do any business at all with Iran. And you have to choose. You want to do business with us? You want to do business with Iran? And that's why the United Arab Emirates over the weekend said, okay, we're done. We're not going to trade with Iran. The other big target of this, though, is China, because China is buying Iranian oil. They're buying it for various different ways. And I think the conversation that President Trump is having right now with the Chinese leadership is, hey, look, we are going to cut you out. We'll either punish you with our trade agreement, with tariffs, with our banking system, if you continue to do business with Iran. And by the way, why don't you just buy American oil? Don't buy Iranian oil. And right now, I think it's with who's going to blink first. Is Iran going to blink first and say, okay, we're not going to have economic devastation, we'll do a deal? Are the countries that I've just talked about, are they going to blink first and say, well, we need to trade with America a whole lot more than we need to trade with Iran? Or does President Trump blink first, and he's not going to blink first?
Biad, what are your thoughts on this plan?
I think you said it, Rob, very well. It's an economic isolation. So where Iran is right now is globally, and politically, it's probably the most isolated country out, and putting it right next to North Korea, and probably. And really what this plan is advancing here is what's really unilateral U.S. sanctions can't accomplish. Bringing our allies and partners, but also really engage with countries such as China and others, whether it's through diplomatic engagements or the threat of sanctions. And I think Secretary Besson is leaving some room for diplomatic engagements, but also it was very clear that the U.S. Treasury Department is prepared to move forward with some sanctions against financial institutions.
And those seem like they would be, as a sanctions expert, that what they're doing, what they're planning, will have some serious grip, some serious impact. Miad?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes the threat works better than the tool itself.
Yeah.
Every time I engage with the Chinese banks and institutions, they were actually willing to comply with U.S. sanctions, so they don't end up being on U.S. economic sanctions list.
KT, there's obviously the critics are out there already talking today, saying that this is just another plan that's not going to work. It's just more the same, that the regime will just cower and wait till it's over, wait till there's a new administration here in the United States. What's your reaction to that?
They don't have that. They'll run out of time. I mean, in the last 48 hours, the president of Iran, the president of the Central Bank of Iran, and the Speaker of the Parliament have all come out publicly and said to the IRGC, the guys who don't want any kind of a deal at all, they've said, we need a deal. We cannot continue in this way without our economy is collapsing around our very head. So you've got to do a deal. So I think you're already seeing big fractures in the Iranian leadership, and that's what we want, right? A leadership that's fractured is not a strong leadership, and hopefully, as Scott Besson today implied, the way the Iron Curtain came down was when the mid-level people decided they were no longer going to fire against their own people. Yeah. And I think that's his message to the Iranians is, look, if you don't like what the leaders are doing, stand up and do something else.
Yeah, that was a big part of his speech today, Miad, was talking directly to, I don't know if any of them were able to hear it or how much of it they could hear, but he essentially said, why are you going to stick with this regime? Like help your people. Let's, get away from this, revolt.
Right, and here's where things stand. In January, these are the forces had to go on the street and kill 40,000, 50,000 of their fellow Iranians to keep the regime in place. Now, if they're not getting paid, or if they're getting paid but they can't buy anything with their salary, given the inflation rate of 300% food inflation, 80% of overall inflation, government's revenue in Iran, the Iranian regime, is 40% oil and 60% taxation. Both of these are gone. They're not importing because of the U.S. naval blockade. They're not really generating revenue from import and taxation because domestic production capacity has significantly dropped, and they're not exporting oil. So they can keep printing rial and paying salaries to these forces, but if they can't buy anything with the salary, that's just not paying salary.
If your paycheck buys nothing, who cares if you got a paycheck? KT and Miad, thanks so much, guys. We appreciate it. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
All right, it's time to get back to school. The president today, with his education secretary, talking big about the plans they have for education in this country and what they've done to make it a lot better, including removing wokeness and a lot of other terrible things. That's coming up next.
I want to thank you all and welcome you to the White House as we celebrate back to school season in America. It's a big deal.
All across the nation, people can't stop talking about Carl Higbie and Frontline for the big news they need to know. Watch Carl Higbie, Frontline, tomorrow at 6 p.m., only on Newsmax.
Paul Revere here. I fully endorse Rapid Radios. They are the only nationwide walkie-talkies without any monthly fees. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've got a cell phone. Cell phones are notoriously unreliable during emergencies and when you're in the middle of nowhere. Plus, Rapid Radios are great for emergency preparedness and for keeping in touch with your loved ones.
Hey, Pa. Over.
You make me so proud, son. Over.
Get up to 60% off today, plus free shipping at rapidradios.com.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that. No needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
See you Sunday, Jim. Whoa! Delivery.
Thanks, Kirk.
You like that?
See you Sunday, Jim.
Sunday.
See you Sunday. See you Sunday.
See you Sunday.
I just got my pilot's license. See you Sunday. The whole town can feel it. Sunday's coming.
The NFL on CBS, streaming all season on Paramount+.
See you Sunday.
That's my boy Cam Scanlon.
Whoa!
The pain is gone. It's gone. I was wheeled in. I couldn't even move 5 feet without the wheelchair. I was in awful pain.
Are you able to get onto the bed?
I doubt it.
No?
We went through the whole intake interview, did the MRI, x-rays. I was awake through the surgery, came back to recovery. I was there for 10 minutes, and I got up and I walked.
Venati succeeds where others fail.
Millions of Americans rely on a statin to reduce cholesterol, but statins can deplete CoQ10 levels. I recommend Cunol CoQ10 with 3 times better absorption and the #1 cardiologist recommended form. It helps replenish what statins deplete. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Our nurse-led care anticipates needs before they're voiced. From skilled nursing to companion care that renews the soul.
This is our time, you know? His favorite route is the long way around. Now we can take it again. I'm not sure who loves this freedom more, him or me.
Being out here alone is my happy place. Nature can have its threats, but I'm prepared.
I'm not trying to fight wildlife. I just don't want one bad encounter deciding everything.
Carry confidence wherever you go with Byrna. And now it's the biggest sale ever at Byrna.com.
For years, I was hiding my drinking. I'm the type of drinker that I don't just have one. I didn't want to feel that urge anymore. That's what brought me to Oar Health. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband. I just have a more grounded and present life, thanks to Oar Health.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
I want to thank you all and welcome you to the White House as we celebrate back to school season in America. It's a big deal. We have so many star students. I want to make offers to some of you to come and join us as soon as you get out of college. We want smart people. We like smart people. There's no job more important than teaching our children to become happy, healthy, proud, productive, and flourishing citizens.
Nothing is more important in our country than educating our students.
All right, so nobody has made bolder moves against the unions and the federal bureaucracy that is destroying our country's education system more so than the president and his education secretary, Linda McMahon. And it's been actually very enjoyable to watch this process go through. Right now, this duo is working to fully shut down the education department at the federal level. They want to shut down the entire department and keep education controlled at the most local levels possible to get that money as close to your kids as they can get it. So it's not controlled by these massive unions and bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. The banning of critical race theory and also aggressive work to enhance charter schools, just more of that very important effort being done. All of that was celebrated today at the Rose Garden at the White House. The big, beautiful bill also establishing a federal tax credit up to $1,700 in contributions to nonprofits that award scholarships to students. The president brought up a family to say a few words. Caleb and Joseline Griffith from North Carolina. They're 3 biological kids and 2 fosters as well. Take a listen to this.
I'm Pastor Caleb Griffith, and I'm joined by my 5 beautiful children. And we're blessed to be from a state that offers school choice, and it has helped part of our children's educational needs. I personally have seen the benefit of the Opportunity Scholarship for my family and the school my children attend. And now, because of you, Mr. President, and because of you, Secretary McMahon, the Educational Freedom Tax Credits will give my children the access to the services they need to be successful in the most formational years of their lives.
School choice, the right to have charter. And in a country that has such a problem with education, give these parents the right to choose where their kids go to school. Anna Kelly's the Deputy Press Secretary at the White House. Anna, good to see you. Talk about today and just how important these messages are. There's a lot of people in this country that live in places where the schools are terrible and they're forced to pay taxes. They don't have an option on where their kids go to school. That, to me, is a crime.
Well, Rob, you provided a pretty nice summary there yourself, but I'd agree. The president is the most pro-family and pro-student president in history, and he's accomplished so much through returning power back to states and local communities, enhancing school choice by implementing the first nationwide school choice program in history. And as you said, that is returning the power away from these big corporations, from this consolidated practice that unfortunately for decades and decades has failed our students. We want to turn the power back to parents and families, which is exactly what this president campaigned on and exactly where it belongs. So the president, as you noted, hosted a back-to-school event today talking about those accomplishments as well as all of the things he's doing to empower students, empower families, and make America's education system great again.
I love that. I want to show this for a second. The Washington Examiner in California, North Monterey County Unified School District, has a report from there. A newly introduced ethnic studies course has required curriculum teaching critical race theory, its tenets, and recurring themes of power, privilege, and oppression threaded through retellings of American history. The course teaches America is an imperial colonizer and that 9/11 served as a catalyst to bring about more blatant discrimination against Muslims. Also reportedly cites Osama bin Laden's manifesto as proof that the U.S. targeted Muslim communities. The fact that this is out there is what's left of the education department run by McMahon. Are they going to go after these kinds of stories? You can't have kids learning this nonsense in our schools.
Well, I think you know, Rob, so much of the Biden administration's Department of Education, unfortunately, was focused on this divisive woke curriculum, focused on pushing CRT, DEI, other programs that unfortunately divide students based on their race, their religion, the color of their skin, that rather than empowering students, empowering all students with the education they need to be successful. So the president has rightfully stripped away a lot of that DEI funding, returning that funding, and again, that power back into the hands of states, of local communities that, again, are closer to the actual children that they are serving, to ensure that parents, that local communities are all involved in the process.
I love that. Anna Kelly from the White House, thanks so much. Good to see you. All right, coming up here after the break, the Washington Post forced to rehire a columnist who slandered Charlie Kirk with a total lie right after his assassination. That's up next.
When you're in the news business, it never stops. News is always breaking, and it's my job to get you the news, no spin, no BS. If you don't believe us, just watch us.
Watch Finnerty, weeknights, only on Newsmax.
Home inspectors, contractors, roofers. All kinds of pros recommend Leaf Filter. Why? Topped by stainless steel micro mesh, Leaf Filter is engineered for protection. In testing, Leaf Filter handles double the water volume of common hood-style guards without overflow. Our product design is driven by relentless innovation, ensuring optimal performance even in the toughest storms. And we back it all with a lifetime clog-free guarantee.
Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points per second and quickly alerts you to identity threats you could miss, like changes to your investment accounts, home title, and loans opened in your name, right on your phone. LifeLock. Join today.
When Saturday rolls around, I don't want to jump through hoops to watch college football. Good thing DirecTV makes it easy to keep up with my favorite college teams. No hopping between apps or channels.
Stream college football without the hurdles on DirecTV.
An official message from Medicare. When you're turning 65 and it's time to enroll in Medicare, it's an unfamiliar step, but with the right guidance, you find your rhythm. It helps to know where to turn. Medicare.gov. There you can learn when to sign up, how to sign up, and explore your coverage options. That way, you can confidently step into Medicare. Medicare.gov, the official source for Medicare. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Case after case, unsolved.
You're partnering with one of the most ruthless mobsters in history.
I ain't got nothing to say to no authorities.
Hey, not yet.
Who's it?
That's my driver.
By any means. Rated R, September 4th.
Kevin Sorbo here, and I have an important message to share. The government needs more money. Your money. If you owe the IRS back taxes, they can garnish your wages and levy your bank accounts. They can even seize your retirement or take your home. Don't let the IRS target you. Call the professionals at Tax Network USA. Their tax lawyers and enrolled agents are experts in powerful programs that may even help you eliminate your tax debt.
Call for a free consultation or visit tnusa.com.
Total Beats, America's best-selling Beats brand, is available at Walmart. Total Beats blood pressure support soft chews contain a key ingredient clinically shown to deliver 2 times better blood pressure support. Take control of your health. Head to Walmart and get Total Beats blood pressure support soft chews today.
Whether it's care before or after school, or a sitter for date night, you don't have to hire just anyone. You can find a background-checked caregiver who's the right fit for you. Join now and find care at care.com.
Welcome back. One of the more ridiculous stories of the day. The Washington Post has been forced to rehire a columnist who was fired last year for slandering Charlie Kirk on the day of his assassination. Karen Attiah gets her job back along with back pay and lost benefits. Now, this was the day that Charlie was assassinated last September. A very dim-witted Attiah posting on Blue Sky, where all the liberals hide. Part of what keeps America so violent is the insistence that people perform care, empty goodness, and absolution for white men that espouse hatred and violence. Adding, refusing to tear my clothes and smear ashes on my face in performative mourning for a white man that espoused violence is not the same as violence. She put that on her private account while working for the Washington Post, and the Post says, well, you're a despicable person, you're fired. Well, now she's back. Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, joins us now. Tom, good to see you. Arbitrator in this, forcing the Post to rehire her, writing in her decision, the arbitrator saying the Post did not have good and sufficient cause to terminate Attiah and violated its labor agreement. Your response to that? Need his mic, guys. There we go.
They said that they were not, that she had not committed gross misconduct. Well, who gets to decide what gross misconduct is? I guess the arbiter does. And this is part of, this is part of the reason. When you have a unionized workforce, the Writers Guild, right, where you have binding arbitration, sometimes it looks like these matters are out of your hands. What if she was a bad writer? What if she wrote about the same column? She's hyper-racial. She writes, hyper-racial
She's
columns
a black chick
over
that
and over
hates
again.
white guys. That's what she is.
And,
we all know
and
what she is.
the Post had made a decision. They hired a new opinion page editor because they wanted to take the paper in a different direction. Jeff Bezos famously wrote this letter and got in a lot of trouble for it, saying we want to focus on free markets and the like. And so she didn't really have a place there anymore. And this was one of the last straws. But apparently, even that, you're not allowed to fire someone, even if you want to move in a different direction. So it's a conundrum for the Post. I think they probably could have gotten by maybe making her go away and paying her a little bit or something to that effect. We don't know the actual details of how this was handled. But nevertheless, she's going back, and they got to pay her a full year's worth of salary.
Right. I mean, she's basically the Washington Post's Joy Reid is what this woman is. And I mean, the point is that I think they had cause to fire her because she said Charlie Kirk espoused violence. When? Like, I mean, I think right. she denigrated his name. I think it was. I think what she said was unfair. It was wrong on the day of his death. You and I both know there's things that I can't just say anything I want. This place can fire me if I were to say something really, really horrific like that. They could do that, and that would be their right as a company. I don't understand how she got this deal. In a statement, she said, though, that it sends a message to journalists and media institutions everywhere that freedom of expression is always worth fighting for. I guarantee you. Well, what about Charlie Kirk's freedom of expression? I wonder what she would think about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that tweet was so problematic on a number of levels. She said, I refuse to, rend my garments and smear ash. Like, no one was asking her to do that, right? She also lied about Charlie Kirk espousing violence, and she also injected race into it when the fact there was no racial component to this case at all. He was killed by a white guy. So, that tweet was problematic on a number of levels. But again, apparently the arbiter felt it didn't rise to the level of gross misconduct, and so the Post is kind of stuck.
I think I know the politics of the arbiter for sure. I got one more for you before I let you go, Tom. I want to talk about the Jason Arday story, the youngest black Cambridge professor in history. Of course, a story that ended horribly with his suicide. But the guy had a story that was truly impossible to believe. But all of these overeducated lunatics at Cambridge couldn't help themselves from wanting to believe it and wanting to feel like this was possible. He said he couldn't speak until he was 18 years old. He completed 30 marathons in 35 days. He had a story that was just outrageous. The American academic who accused Arday of plagiarism that led to all of this, that led to his ousting from the university, and then obviously he ended up killing himself. Nathan Kofnas here on the screen, a postdoctoral researcher, has been suspended for his role simply for flagging what everybody could see, which is that this guy was a fraud. And they're calling him a racist. He's suspended from his job. What message does that send in the world?
Well, I mean, the contradictions in this case are ridiculous. And the Guardian newspaper, which published, did also a review of Jason Arday's work, tried to have it both ways and said, well, we were just asking legitimate questions that journalists asked, but the right wing piled on with this, racial attack. No, whether Jason Arday was black or white or blue or purple, you cannot have someone assigned or receive tenure at the most prestigious university based on an entire series of plagiarism fabrications. I mean, that's just not acceptable. And so, Kofnas is paying a price for doing the right thing, which is scrutinizing someone's biography. And I dare to say that if all of the people who were in higher education, a lot of these elite universities, had their records scrutinized, they would probably be found to be embellishing, perhaps lying, perhaps there's plagiarism in the background. And so this is something that universities should want to do. And instead they're attacking Nathan Kofnas for doing what they should be doing themselves.
That was such a wild story. So many different areas of that story were wild. Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics. Good to see you. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Some defense of Natalie Harp up next.
I don't know why you have to go after her. She seems incredibly devoted to her job.
Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America. Most investors believe their IRA, 401k, and bank accounts are reliable and safe. But what if our economy becomes so dire that you're restricted from accessing your own money? The fact is that should your bank be in trouble for holding bad loans, the burden could fall on you to help bail them out. Even more concerning is that U.S. financial regulations allow banks to impose withdrawal limits on your hard-earned savings. But there's something you can do about it. Our team at Swiss America has a report called The Secret War on Cash. Learn how to protect yourself with assets that can remain outside the control of banks and other financial institutions. For over 40 years, Swiss America has been one of the most trusted metal firms in the country. So don't wait. Call or text the number on your screen today for financial peace of mind in these uncertain times.
This is our time, His favorite route is the long way around. Now we can take it again. I'm not sure who loves this freedom more, him or me.
Being out here alone is my happy place. Nature can have its threats, but I'm prepared.
I'm not trying to fight wildlife. I just don't want one bad encounter deciding everything.
Carry confidence wherever you go with Byrna
And now it's the biggest sale ever at Byrna.com.
Hi, I'm Mike Hammond with Signal Relief. If your back bothers you day after day, you know it doesn't just affect your back. It changes how you stand, walk, sleep, and how you feel about yourself. Maybe you smile through the grandkids' game, the grocery store, the yard work, or the family trip, quietly counting the minutes until you must sit down, or maybe you just miss those moments altogether. I know how frustrating it is when your body starts making decisions for you. And that's why I'm proud to introduce Signal Core, our new back support system built specifically for everyday backaches. More technology means more relief, and Signal Core has twice the technology as the original patch, and it comes with our money-back guarantee. It's targeted drug-free back support that you can wear through the day. Try Signal Core today by going to signalrelief.com and order your Signal Core.
I'm stressed.
Great white. Swallow you whole.
No. I mean, I'm 45. I need to get screened for colon cancer. All that prep, whole day off the water.
Try Cologuard Plus.
There you go.
It detects 95% of colon cancers, similar to colonoscopy.
And it ships to your home or your ship.
False positive and negative results may occur. The Cologuard Plus test is not for those at high risk.
Hey, is there a poop deck joke here?
There is now.
Several days ago, my plane crashed in the wild.
Good job, buddy.
I'll get you home.
The night has come, and all the land is dark.
I got you. Go on, boy.
Part of the Beast. New trailer online now.
48% of Americans aren't getting enough magnesium, which is essential for nerve, bone, and muscle health. I recommend Cunol High Absorption Magnesium Glycinate. It's gentle on the stomach and helps you get the full benefits of magnesium. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Ever worry that you're drinking too much? Take back control with Or Health. Or Health provides access to medication proven to help. A daily pill to drink less, or to quit drinking altogether. Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Welcome back. Time now for news from the left. Front Office Sports reporting that neither Inez Cantor nor Royce White will be allowed to play in the WNBA. Really? Quote, the league is not going to give oxygen to efforts designed to mock the league or use this topic to demean and marginalize others. This all comes after Inez Cantor was tossed from last night's game between the Chicago Sky and the Indiana Fever. A heated interaction between himself and one of the Chicago Sky guards, Natasha Cloud. Cantor claims that Cloud ran up to him and said he was trying to sleep with Sophie Cunningham, and that's why he was there at the game. They tossed him and are now banning him from ever playing in the league. How anti-trans of them, right? By the way, Natasha Cloud had this to say when addressing the league's issue of sex toys being thrown onto the court during their games.
Y'all lame as in most of these occasions, it's men. And I want you to know that is the gayest thing that you can do is to go to a store, a sex shop, buy a dildo, come to a women's game to throw the dildo on the court. That is the gayest that I've ever heard.
It's not the gayest thing you can do, honey. And in a league full of lesbians, why are you using gay as a slur? If a straight person did so, they would be canceled. In an apparent taunt towards Sophie Cunningham, the Toronto Tempo are now debuting a new non-binary mascot ahead of their WNBA matchup against the Indiana Fever. The Tempo revealing Dez, a non-binary blue snapping turtle who uses she, they pronouns. See, I have no problem with this. If you want to play this imaginary pronoun game, do it with, you know, like a cartoon character, like a mascot. Sure, that works. Just don't try to apply it to people because you look like an idiot. Next up, food stamp enrollment is plummeting in the United States by more than 13% in a 12-month span. Those losing coverage, quote, include people who don't meet the tightening requirements to participate in these programs, which is exactly what you voted for. According to the Department of Ag, Arizona has the steepest decline so far, 12-month drop more than 50%. I'm sure a lot of those are illegals from Central America. In addition, the decline was more than 20% in Georgia, Louisiana, Nevada, and Florida. Nothing corrupts and bankrupts the country faster than its people leaving the workforce and getting on the dole. Historically, you look back, when people stop working, they start counting on government everything collapses. Oddly enough, that's the Democrat Party's entire agenda. Think about that. And finally, comedian Bill Maher, one more from him, defending loyal Trump aide Natalie Harp, questioning why she's become America's political punching bag.
Senator John Ossoff of Georgia, he really went after Trump this week, and in the middle of it, he mentioned Natalie Harp. Natalie is kind of Trump's emotional support employee, that's true, but that's on him. I don't know why you have to go after her. You know, she seems incredibly devoted to her job, never takes a day off. Sometimes she works so hard she forgets to eat and sleep. She had bone cancer in her 20s. She likes Trump because he speeded up experimental treatments, which he believes helped her. But, you know, in America, it's just like, oh, good, someone new to hate.
Got a good point there. All right, coming up after the break, Gavin Newsom makes a despicable move to protect the corruption in his state.
Closed captioning brought to you by MagnaLife Pain and Inflammation Relief Roll-On.
Your muscle and joint inflammation is real. Here's what real customers are saying about MagnaLife Pain and Inflammation Relief Roll-On. It worked great.
Available at your local retailer.
American spirit. It drives the Good Ranchers mission. Forged under open skies. Woven into who we are. From thundering cattle to the laughter we share around the table. It's a legacy carried forward. One meal, one gathering, one generation at a time. This is Good Ranchers, an American meat company built on American spirit.
Your home protects what matters most. Now your water can too. Introducing Aquasana Health Shield, whole home filtration that helps reduce 61 contaminants, including PFAS, VOCs, pesticides, and more. Visit healthshield.com today.
Anybody who's struggling with alcohol should try Or Health. Within a week, the cravings were completely gone. Or Health is safe, science-backed, and it works. I couldn't believe how easy it was. Alcohol doesn't run my life anymore.
Text Newsmax to 710-710 to learn more.
Thinking about a new building project? Only General Steel lets you see your project instantly, followed by pricing you can count on. Design your project in 3D or tell us your vision and we'll do the rest. Text PLAN to 59583 and we'll deliver a personalized design to your inbox in minutes. That's right, you'll see your project inside and out, complete with your customizations instantly. Architects charge thousands to capture your vision like this. Backed by decades of experience and thousands of successful projects, the General Steel design system gives you more than a price. It gives you a clear vision you can build on. Text PLAN to 59583 to create your own building or browse thousands of unique customer designs with new ideas published every hour. From personal shops to business expansions, see your new space inside and out down to the details. Get insulation tailored to your climate, paint colors that perform where you live, and expertly placed doors and windows that deliver access, ventilation, and natural light based on your unique needs. Text PLAN to 59583 to plan and price your project instantly with General Steel. That's PLAN to 59583 because if you need space, you need the General.
Finally tonight, very quietly, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 2624 into law over the weekend, known as the Stop Nick Shirley Act. He just effectively outlawed the tools needed to expose corruption and fraud in a state that he is destroying, a state that has tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars worth of fraud, probably tens of billions every single year. He's prohibiting all the different methods that journalists like Nick Shirley use to expose that fraud being stolen from all of us, from Newsom, from everybody in the state, like he did in Minnesota, where they exposed billions stolen by Somali fraudsters who came here claiming to be refugees. Newsom signing that bill just days after the pervert Terry Shands, the Assembly Chief of Staff, harassed Shirley outside the Capitol. You remember what that sign said and what they did. You saw these horribly corrupt people, desperate. Rob Finnerty with us now. You know, he made no press of it. He just signed it quietly and said, yep, okay.
Yeah, what's
You
that
can't have
sign
people
say?
exposing that.
No, what's that sign say? No bare feet. What's
Yeah.
that sign say? Imagine the Stop Rob Schmitt Act. Like, this kid's 23 years old.
Yeah.
And they signed a law basically saying, hey, if you're committing fraud, don't worry about it. Wink, we got your back. And Gavin Newsom thinks he's going to be president in 2028. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Welcome home, my friend.
How were the handoffs with Bob Brooks? I'm just curious.
I missed you. They were great.
Thank you.
But I still missed you.
I
as
saw
I
a
always
couple.
do.
They were good. A little bumpy, but you guys got off the ground. Good to be back. Good to see you. Finnerty starts now.
Take it away.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.